Good evening. We'd like to call this Monday, March 3rd, School Committee Business Meeting to order. Mrs. Yell, can you take the roll, please?
May Reardon?
Here.
Juliet Walker?
Here.
Sarah Hall?
Here.
Brian Callahan is absent. Kathleen Shaw is absent. Brianna Higgins is absent. Andy Bowler?
Here.
All right, let's rise for the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Now I'll turn the meeting over to Vice Chair Walker.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. So the first item on our agenda is public comment. Do we have anyone sign in for public comment? Okay, and then nobody on Zoom. Okay, great. I mean, not great, but thank you. We do appreciate it if people do want to join us via Zoom. Hopefully, at some point when people feel the need, they will. Okay, so moving on to the next item on the agenda, we have the warrant. Mr. Boger?
Sure. I move that the following named bills of the Newburyport Public Schools amounting in the aggregate $71,754.52 be approved and forwarded to the city auditor for payment.
Second.
Okay, any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The Vice Chair votes aye. All right, next is meeting minutes for February 25th, 2025. Accept a motion to approve.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, any discussion or corrections? All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The Vice Chair votes aye. Student representative report, we do not have that this evening, so we'll hear an update next meeting. Next item is the capital improvement program presentation.
Yes, at this time, I'd like to call up Mr. McSweeney, who's put together the district priorities and then also can kind of walk the school committee through the new format that the city's utilizing for CIP projects.
Thank you for having me again. So, as you can see, it was in your packets, the city's new CIP plan and program, it's very in-depth. Going through every item that we put in has to go through this program. So everything gets a grade based on rubrics that are all in the program. So the idea behind this in working with Kim and Ethan down at City Hall is that they put this together so that every item that gets put into the CIP will basically get a score, and they're all based on the same things. And then those scores will kind of prioritize items. So it kind of brings everything together, and it'll give the city council and everybody a better idea of where our priorities should be and items that should be getting funded every year. So going through it, it was a good process, and it did help me realize, you know, where things should be and how we should be kind of attacking things as a district. So if you look at your list, there were 11 items in our district priority list. The first one up there is the exterior masonry repairs for the high school. Then we have the NHS roof as well as the Knockbowen roof. Those are in the MSBA project. We're still rolling through with them. Actually finished doing their checklist. The budget and financial checklist was submitted today, so that's all done. And then once we get the votes from the city council, we can submit those, and we'll be kind of pushing through the next steps on that process. A couple of items, we have a lot of playground things in here. The Mullen playground, it's the last playground that we have in the district that still has mulch. So we have a big problem with that with ADA compliance. We're always putting mulch in. It's a maintenance heavy item. So we've put in that. The Bresnahan playground, that was done with the school. If you go up there now and you look at it, you can see that the rubber and the surfacing is deteriorating. I do have slides to go along with this. I just want to run through the list real quick first. NHS use and feasibility study. I know that was something that had been done kind of before I got here. We want to revisit that and really start looking at the utilization of all our science classrooms and science labs as new programs, especially the robotics classroom in particular. That was one that's come up. It's kind of in a space that's not really conducive to what they're trying to do. So we need to really have somebody come in and take a look at our classrooms and our labs and how we're utilizing and kind of direct us in a better way to be utilizing those spaces and help us come up with a plan to do any construction or any changes we need to make to those spaces to better support those programs. Engineering and planning, that's, I know my predecessor Steve had tried to put in for this before, that's what we like to call that like a house doctor, an architect firm, an engineering firm that would kind of be on call, and we'd be able to bring them in when we have issues, whether it be at the high school or, you know, further down the road, other buildings. They'd be able to come in and to really direct us and you know, give us the best way to attack problems and issues that we're having in some of our buildings, such as, you know, roof leaks or facade issues or windows or doors or things like that. NHS flooring. So the high school was redone back in 2002. So it's 23 years, a lot of old carpeting, a lot of the concrete flooring is showing its wear, showing its age, and it's time to get that replaced. One of the main focuses we want to look at is the library, the main office, the front entryway, and then the lower athletics area, going door to door. And not just replacing with carpet, but looking what is the best option to be put down there. Obviously, the library will be carpeting, but is that the best option for the library? Looking at the front entryway, I think we'd be looking at more like an epoxy over the concrete, really hold up well, slip resistant, those kind of things. The next is the Knockmolen playground repaving. So actually working with Kim Turner down at the mayor's office again, she put that in for a CPC grant. So hopefully that will come through. We'll be able to get all that area dug up and repaved and recoded. Also working with her on, you know, what can we put down there? I know we've talked about this in the past about not just putting the basketball down there, but also the Foursquare, which is a big game for the kids down there. And then working with the gym teachers, they asked if there could be like some track lanes painted down, some, you know, small dollar items, but could be a big impact to the programming and student use down there. Knockmolen kitchen equipment, something we've been going through this year. We've actually been replacing some kitchen equipment in the other schools. There's some grant money that's been made available to us, so we're going to continue to use that money to help upgrade and change out some of this older aging equipment in our kitchens. The NHS auditorium, this is another one we're going to push. We're putting it in now so that the number's in there and everybody's made aware of this, but it's something we wouldn't tackle until after the roof project is completed. You know, the roof is leaking. We all know that, and the plaster in that space is definitely showing its wear and its age from the roof leaks that have been there. And then electrification of the high school. You know, we just had the issue with the hot water heater. Luckily, we got that all taken care of. But looking at the age of the boilers and the chillers and a lot of the big mechanical systems in there, how do we start addressing those? They're all reaching the end of their life cycle. So how do we, you know, address those and change those out? And environmentally, what's the best way to do that? You know, whether do we change out the boilers to smaller, more efficiency boilers? Do we put a heat pump system in that replaces the chillers and the boilers? What's going to be the best way to go about that? We're also going to be looking at the MSBA as well as utility grants and utility rebates to help fund all that. So if I could get the slideshow, please. Right. So again, we're looking at the high school, looking at the exterior. You can see this is the West Terrace. So right by where you would park if you were going to a football game, you can see the concrete is deteriorating at a rapid pace, and those are the stairs that actually would come up from that little parking lot by the football field up to that terrace. They're unsafe and they're unusable, and we actually have them blocked off right now. And a lot of this is just water infiltration and the way that the drainage, or the way the water's not draining. Next slide. So this is a picture of the other side looking at that terrace, and you can actually see some of the brickwork is actually pulling away from itself. You can see the crack along that top column there where the railing comes in. The brick is actually falling apart and coming away from itself, and then you can see where it's all spalling and the grout is actually falling out, as well as that bottom right corner picture shows you where some of the concrete's actually gone away and the railing has actually become unsafe. Next picture. This is the front of the building, and this is actually pictures of the ramp on the left side of the building if you're looking at it, so going up to the auditorium. Again, all that concrete is really deteriorating due to water infiltration and poor drainage. We actually had to shut that ramp down because we had an ADA complaint filed with the city. So if you come up to the school, that ramp is actually blocked off and shut down. So this is a big priority for us at the high school, is getting that addressed and making this area safe. So, next. Yes. Sure. Yep.
I guess my question as I look at this, obviously dire need of help, but you mentioned the underlying issue is drainage primarily. Would we be able to
We'd be looking
fix-
at that as well. So it's not, we don't want to just come out and just top coat or just fix the patches.
Right.
We actually want to have an engineering firm come out and look at it and tell us what's the best way to fix this for a more permanent solution.
Okay.
From my understanding, there was some patchwork done a few years ago, maybe 4 or 5 years ago. And I think if we just do a patchwork again in another few years, we're going to be looking at the same thing.
Yeah.
So the idea is to really look at this with an engineering firm and have them come out and really look at the best way to do it. And it's going to be an intrusive project, and this will be something we have to do during the summer where we'd be shutting down that whole front entryway.
Right. So, and maybe are you going to get to the breakdown of costs later on, or, because I'm just curious if, for example, that engineering, like what the cost.
That engineering cost is
Part of
built
that?
into that, is part of that
Okay.
funds, yes.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah, I don't have a lot of breakdowns
Go
of
ahead.
these individual costs.
Member
Yeah, in regards to the ADA compliance issue in the front there, we do have a workable ramp on
We
the
have a
other
ramp on the
side,
other side,
correct?
yes, so when
Which
they-
still provides the same access?
It does, yep. we're
Not to
still-
minimize this, but just to be clear,
We are
Okay,
still in
yeah.
ADA compliance, but it's not a great situation to be in.
Of course.
Obviously, if people go in the auditorium, we want them to come up that one side, not have to traverse all the way across. But we are still in compliance because we've shut it down so nobody can use it. Even, able-bodied people can't use it, so it's
Sure.
completely shut down. And unfortunately, that's what's keeping us in ADA compliance, the fact that we shut the whole thing down. But it's not a great situation to be in at all, so.
Right. And then follow-up question, maybe you're going to get to this, but we're seeing lots of different projects in this, 1.5 million or
Yes.
so.
The-
Within that, are these projects being prioritized within that larger amount? Because it does seem like
Yes.
some may be more
Yes,
pressing than others.
Yes, definitely.
Okay.
So the first priority would be to get to this front area first. Complete the ADA, making sure that the front of the building is accessible to everybody and that it's safe. And then as we would come around, we would start with the stairs and that upper terrace on the west side, and then funds available, we would look at the east side, make sure we're all safe on that side as well.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions on this project?
Well,
Berger?
just in terms of, as Ms. Hall was saying, the 1.5 encapsulates all the brick and masonry across the building, or that's
In these
essentially
particular
this?
areas.
Okay,
yes.
okay.
Yes.
Great. Okay, thank you.
So again, we're talking about the roof at the NHS, so I just kind of highlighted the area of roof that we're working with the MSBA, and it's the roof right over the auditorium. I think we've all pretty much talked about that one. Knockmolen, same thing. This is just an overhead view with the highlighted area of the section of roof that we're looking to get replaced with the MSBA. Here's the Molen Playground. As you can see, it's some of the structures out there are aged and older, and the mulch is definitely an issue, especially one of the things we've noticed is that when we get heavy rains, a lot of it comes down that hill that's on the back side and will wash the mulch down into where the Foursquare is in the picture there, and it actually blocks up the drainage that's in the area. So looking at this playground, we'd be looking at removing all the structures there, taking the mulch out, looking at the drainage in that area, doing better drainage, and then doing a poured-in-place rubber like we have with the Bresnahan, and then doing new structures that are going to be suitable for the age groups that are out there. Making it ADA accessible would be a prime goal for this project.
Thank you. Any questions on this project?
Okay.
And then we're going to be looking at the President Playground, the rubber surfacing, so you can see in some of these pictures the wear and tear that it's had, under the swings in particular, some of the places where it's cracked and actually pulling apart.
Is that pretty typical lifespan for that, 10 years?
It really depends on the use and its location. This gets a lot of sun beat down on it, so that will dry out the rubber. One thing we've noticed is that there is a top coating that you can put on it on a 3 or 4 year basis, and that will help protect it a little bit. And I don't think that was done, but that's something we'd be looking at doing going forward with the new surface.
So is this similar in terms of the approach to the when you say repairs, is it actually replacement?
It will be a replacement.
Okay,
of the
so it's
rubber
similar
surface, yeah.
in the scale of what the Mullen would be, except that there's an existing surface here, but you're basically replacing it like you would be adding
Yeah,
it.
when you replace the rubber surfacing, all the structures can stay in place because they're
I
actually
see.
put in before so it's just a matter of coming in and tearing up the rubber and then
Okay.
replacing the rubber surfacing. So all the play structures would stay the same and all that would stay in place. It would just be a matter of replacing the rubber surfacing. Now, if you're looking at the cost factor, if you look at the size of the playground here at the Bresnahan, where you've got the small playground for the kindergarten, and then you've got the larger playground, we'd be replacing all of that rubber surfacing. So it comes down to square footage.
Yeah.
This playground is a lot bigger than the one for Mullen, so that's why you're going to be looking at the cost being pretty close. And you can see, in a couple of more of these pictures where all the cracking and the rubber surfacing is actually missing and been damaged.
Any other questions on this one? Okay.
So we're going to be talking about the high school flooring. So again, you're looking at the upper left corner picture is a picture of the library. So you can see where the carpet's been torn, and there's a few other places in the library that are like that. Unfortunately, there was full of students when I was in there taking pictures, so I was trying to be mindful of that. And then if you look at the bottom picture, that's the front entryway. You can see those front stairs, the concrete showing its wear. So the idea, again, would be to actually come in, and where all that concrete is going up in the ramps to the left and right, would be to put epoxy over those, as well as the stairs, and going into the main office and stopping at those front doors. And then the same idea would be, the tunnel area, again, doing a pour-in-place epoxy, and depending on the cost, we'd actually be looking at doing that main hallway that goes from door to door across the other side of that tunnel space. So if you were to come in from that small parking lot by the stadium and cut across all the way to the gym, we'd be looking at doing that whole hallway with the poured epoxy. And kind of the thought process of being able to do that would be the tiles in the wintertime become very slippery, right? They get wet, the tile becomes very slippery, becomes kind of a slip hazard. So the idea of the epoxy was it'd be more traction based. So anybody coming in, and especially the football players coming through with their cleats, or soccer or lacrosse, whatever sport would be coming across there, isn't going to have that slip hazard. It'll also hold up a lot better than the tile would. The other side of it is from a maintenance factor. We're looking at really trying to take out tile as much as we can in places as we can go through the school and do floor replacement. The tiles, the VCT tiles that are in place, and that's been, since, beyond time with schools, the problem with them is during the summertime, we have to strip and wax all those tiles, and it's very labor intensive, and it's very, it's very costly between buying the chemicals for the stripping and then re-waxing. So the idea would be to replace that tile with the epoxy, and would eliminate a lot of labor man hours and the cost for the chemicals and the wax throughout that we do every summer. All right. Any questions?
Any questions on that one? Okay.
And then this is the Knockmullen Playground. Like I said, we're working with Kim Turner from the Mayor's Office in the CPC grant. The idea would, again, be to come and pulverize and reclaim the pavement, repave it, 4 new basketball supports, backboards and rims and nets, repaint the top coating, remark out all the basketball courts, 4 square, and then potentially some other track lanes or other little games that could be beneficial for the students. Any questions? Back to the high school for the auditorium. So here's just some pictures showing the water damage in the plaster from the ceilings and some of the wall spaces that we have. So again, the idea would be to wait till after the roof is replaced and then come through and do all the repairs in the ceiling and the walls, skim coat, repaint, and address all these issues to hopefully bring that auditorium back to, the historical space that it should be. And then here's just some more pictures of some of the wall damage and things that we'd be looking to address with that. Any questions? So here are the two boilers that we have. So these two boilers, big old dinosaurs, they actually supply all the hot water for heating throughout the whole building. And it was actually funny, I actually went and I was looking in one of the rooms that had a bunch of old pictures of the old school, and the original boilers were about the same size as these. So the idea again would be to get rid of these old boilers that when these run, it's similar to the old hot water heater. When the old hot water heater ran, it was running at 100% all the time, and that's what these are. When they get called to come on, they just run. There's no fluctuation in their firing rate or utilization based on what the need of the building is. So when these come on, they just come on full bore and run. And again, not very energy efficient, and yeah. So again, the idea would be to look at these as well as the chillers and try to make the building more energy efficient. Any other questions on that one? And that is all I have.
All right, so maybe you could just, we can clarify sort of the next step. I think in the past we've seen the individual sheets that have been submitted to the city. Is that still what?
No, and that's what the
that
capital
doesn't happen anymore.
program
Okay.
is taking the place of that, yes.
So it would, I guess each of these has some kind of ranking though, right?
Yes, they all received a score. I have to go, I can definitely go back in and try to pull the scores from each one of these and send those out to everybody if that's.
Yeah.
I think it would be helpful to
Yes.
just kind of see a little more of that process and how
I
those
just don't
score-
know how those scores are going to fall in with anything that the city's put in, whether through DPS, and I can send you what the scores are, but I don't know where they're going to rank with everything else.
Yeah, I think we
So,
just want to,
yeah.
I think for our purposes, just how they rank against each other
Yeah.
in different categories.
Mm-hmm.
What is the next step with the CIP? Are we doing it at the same time as the budget? Okay. So do you need our sign off on this at any time, or are you just sort of part of the budget process?
I think it'd be part of the budget process and then kind of what we're prioritizing, but once James submitted our information to the city, then we're in the big pool.
Okay. Yeah, I think it would be helpful to see just a little more breakdown and
I agree.
description of the projects and a little bit of more of an understanding of what the costs that are factored into those descriptions. So maybe that comes out in the detail, but and obviously engineering, like some of our questions about what the project entails. And any other requests or questions?
I just had a question. So this is just for FY26, so are you also submitting like the other 4 years of possible projects that could come up, and that'll be like in the appendix of the CIP?
Well, knowing that we're not going to get all this funding, there are some big ticket items in here, so the idea is that get all these out there, and these are just continuations of what's been submitted, plus a couple of new ones from previous 5-year plans.
Oh, okay, so there's
Yeah.
no additional projects than this you're submitting? Oh,
No,
okay.
no.
Makes me feel a little...
So that's interesting. So to
Yeah.
the mayor's point,
Yeah,
I guess it would be interesting if you have a breakdown of, when you say, are there some of these that are less urgent than others? Obviously, the breakdown and I don't know. When this goes to the city, are you going to have a plan for how this could potentially be funded over years? Like, are you necessarily going to spend all 1.5, for example, for the masonry right up in fiscal year '26, or would that be something that could be spread over multiple fiscal years?
The anticipation would be done over a couple of years.
Okay,
Yes.
so maybe that's also something we could see. I don't know how that gets ultimately reported to the city.
I think it's I think the old capital improvement, how we used to do it, is a lot different now. So James is filling out a lot of that information online through the city, and I don't think you can't print that out yet, right?
I can, but it's not very reader friendly when you
Right.
do that.
It's not like
because
the old.
That's too bad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So one of the things that, and please correct me if I'm wrong on this, but my understanding is that once everyone has all their CIPs submitted, the idea is that everything will get a score, and then everything will just be on a sheet, scores, 100 down to 10, and then based on what the monies available are for the CIP for that year, they'll count down until the money's gone. Those, say it's 10 projects down, those 10 projects will get funded, and then everything moves up. And then kind of keep trucking along that way.
Possible.
Well,
Well,
I think most departments will have like their projects of end by year, right? So, we have a lot of projects out there, and I'm thinking of like DPS in particular, where most of their projects in the past would be in those sheets that we were just listening to. Now, if they don't fall into that 5-year, prioritization that we're seeing, those things will just be in the appendix, so they'll still be alive somewhere. But like it should be a much more narrow focus this year as far as the CIP by department. So again, this isn't exactly what I was thinking, because I was looking at that and it said FY26. I was like, wow, that is an ambitious, ambitious FY26 list.
yeah, 26 through 30.
Right, yeah.
Sorry.
yeah, so I think that for our purposes, if you could try to present this in a way that's a little bit more about, and I understand that it's harder to capture it because you don't have the form necessarily in front of you, but some of the basic data about, like I said, like sort of how the priorities compare to each other, the projects compare to each other priority-wise, and potential like plan for how they could be funded. Understanding that it's a little bit out of your control beyond inputting the information, but I think that would be helpful to me and others maybe.
Yeah, I mean, I think seeing like where they landed as far as prioritization, right?
Yeah.
But you're right, there are some big ticket items, right? So obviously we're all focused on the roofs right now.
Right.
And then things that are coming from funding that we already know of, like, CPC, which is great. I mean, I'm confident that, the playground at the Knockmullen will get approved this year, so that'll be great to get that project done. So, the funding piece obviously is, incredibly important.
Yeah. And I'm a big fan of the house doctor idea. I think it's going to take some explanation to really push why that's important to do, but
Is that a one-off or is that a yearly? The engineering, so the $80,000, would that be?
That would be over the course of 5 years. Yeah.
Okay.
Is that something that could possibly like work its way into the budget as well? So they'd have I don't know. We have a line item at DPS around consultants and engineering that we have to, outsource, opposed to it being like a capital. Is that? I don't know if that's something that exists.
I've seen
Is this
it done
already
both
in
ways.
if it's a budget or?
Yeah, I've seen it done both ways.
Okay.
The reason I attack it this way is because that's what had been submitted before.
Okay.
So I was just trying to continue that, but if it's something that we want to talk about doing it the other way, I would not be opposed to a...
No, I was just curious.
Yeah.
yeah, that might be worth thinking about. Yeah, and I think that obviously, to me, the high school, the masonry prayers and exterior, like definitely there's some urgency there, but I think also within that, there's certainly some level of priority within, as Ms. Hall mentioned. So some understanding of what you would attack first if you had the funding for 5 years. But I do, and also the underlying issue certainly would be important to address. So. All right, anything else? Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. All right, the next item is our initial presentation on level of service from the superintendent.
All right, thank you.
What?
I thought it was 1 year.
I was sorry,
Great numbers. I was like, I don't know what to make.
All right. Before I get started, I also, we just got a memo from MASC, and it was kind of a joint memo regarding, I think, throughout the Commonwealth, some of the budgetary challenges for a lot of the districts. So for our next school committee, I'll include that memo, but also, it's a lot of the same information as I present our level service budget tonight. A lot of uncertainty, especially with the grants and some of the funding sources that's impacting, I think, all cities and towns across the state. And as the mayor alluded to just a few minutes ago, you know, the funding sources for not only the capital improvement projects and school funding, there is just a lot of uncertainty throughout the Commonwealth with our times right now. So I'll call up Mike. Why don't you come on up? Like, you'll just in case I need you, but I've been doing this for a little bit. I might not need you right now, but just in case. Let me just make sure this is scrolling here. This might be the shortest presentation ever. Yeah, it's not. Let's try it again. All right, I guess I'll go page by page. So basically, in the packet that you all have, that's our table of contents of our priorities, budget assumptions, level service budget, really highlighting the demographic trends that you've seen over the years, and those continue to grow. And then also our budget background information. So as always, as we begin the budget process, we start off with our priorities, which ties into our strategic planning and our vision. Teaching and learning is obviously our number one priority. People and personnel to meet the needs of all of our students, and then our operations, as Mr. McSweeney just kind of talked about through some of the capital improvement projects. And really tied to our strategic focus areas through the strategic plan. And then the last piece is really looking at our budget assumptions as we begin the budget process like we do every year. So the first piece is always looking at the contractual obligations. And since we're in negotiations, we're kind of, I don't want to say we're behind a little bit, but I don't have those hard numbers that I would typically have as we begin our budget process. But for this presentation tonight, we've really have a pretty good estimate. So we're estimating what these salary increases could be, which is kind of just tied in with the overall budget presentation tonight. And just want to thank our school committee, our negotiating team, along with the unions that we're working with. We're kind of ahead of schedule in contract negotiations, and we're working on some of those compensation packages through negotiation. So we should be, I think, in the next few weeks, have a better understanding where we're landing with the contractual obligations. The other piece is when we talk about uncertainty, the federal and state mandates, as we would all say, bless you, as we would all say every year, a lot of these state and federal mandates are unfunded. But now with some of the changes in policy, some of our annual funding that we receive from the federal government regarding special education, Title I, some entitlement grants, those numbers is something that we'll continue to watch. And those would have our English learner programs, students on IEPs, students with disabilities, transportation, kindergarten. So all of those are the federal and state mandates that we're obligated to work with our families Sorry, I'm just trying to straighten this out. Level service budget drivers here, very similar to what I just talked about. So from our expenses for all programs, so really a level service is taking everything you have existing and then moving it into the next fiscal year and trying to anticipate inflation rates, contract obligations, utilities, building maintenance, transportation costs, and all of those aspects. And as I just alluded to, in addition to our typical budget drivers, we're facing the unprecedented instability in planning federal and state grants at this time. There is no news, and we have a governor and lieutenant governor along with attorney general and many of our state legislators and state officials and city officials that continue to put these grants and these funds ahead. So we're very fortunate to be in Massachusetts, and we really take a collaborative approach all the way from the governor's office down to all of the districts, schools, and towns. So we're very, very fortunate to have our leadership in government at this time. So here's just some of our, and this is always the first pass. So this is not where this is going to end up, as we always do this. This is my 7th year, so there's no sticker shock right now. But as we look at what's really driving a lot of these costs right now is, if you recall, last year we utilized a lot of our revolving accounts and some of our surplus to balance this year's budget, and we anticipate of doing the same thing. Except we don't have, a lot of those revolving accounts don't have the balances that we've had in the past, okay? So as we begin our city appropriation with a lot of the unknowns, as we said, especially with the contracts, inflation costs, utility costs, so we're coming in at this point today at a 7.26. When we look at Medicaid, so these are the actual numbers for the school department, and Mike Wood and TMS have been really, instead of looking at projections, especially even though we're early, to put in some of the actual numbers that we can anticipate. So the Medicaid at $128,000, which would be down by $71,000. Our preschool tuition is up $6,000, and then other tuition. So other tuitions is from our Educatus, our foreign exchange program, along with we have a couple students who are tuitioning in and accessing some of our special education programs. So that's that tuition. With the once again, with the way the change of government and with student visas and students exchange programs, a lot of those students that were accessing American public schools are no longer wanting to come to the United States. So that's where we see some of that drop. But we do have some students from other countries that are still part of that program. Our school choice tuition, every year we've increased the cost, and for next year we anticipate to be utilizing about $800,000, which is $50,000 than before for last year. And every year we've been utilizing more and more school choice to balance the budget. So we can, I think, go up to $800,000 this year, and we're still trying to leave a balance as we go into every year between $300,000 and $600,000. But I think closer for this year will be closer. Our balance will probably be a little bit lower, closer more to the $300,000. Athletic revolving account, we've shifted a lot of that revolving spending into the athletic budget. So at this point, we have $210,000 that we anticipate to utilize, because once again, that revolving account is down by probably around, coming in by the next year will probably be, say, Mike, like around about $100,000 less than what we anticipate coming in and what we're spending going out. Building rental revolving, so we anticipate that's been pretty constant, around $30,000 or so. So we, dollar change there, we just anticipate that. Transportation revolving, we plan on anticipating utilizing more, so that's $203,000, which would be an increase of about 50% of our transportation costs, and I believe that's just for more students have signed up this year for transportation. The IDA Special Education Grant, which typically comes in at around $500,000. We anticipate $575,000. But once again, this is one of those federal grants that, working with the governor, this is a grant that we're watching right now, depending on, especially with the rhetoric that's being discussed around the Department of Education and some of those grants. The entitlement grants, we do anticipate this. We haven't heard any official word, but we're planning on a reduction of around $20,000, and that's for some of our student population. But if you all recall, the entitlement grants is early literacy, it's translation, it's support of our L families. So we do anticipate some sort of reduction there. The professional development grant, this is the Swayze funding, but we're probably going to start pulling this out of the budget because we can only utilize that. Teachers can only utilize that because of how the grant is written is for teachers. So for teachers, professional development, that's teacher driven. So it's not, speaking with Mike and TMS, this is an account that you don't want to put into your budget that you can depend that you're going to be spending that money, because it's very specific on how we can utilize that as a district. Last year, circuit breaker. So the circuit breaker is another revolving account that you can utilize. Obviously, we utilize, it's the majority of it is for our special education costs, some special education transportation. So typically, we spend a certain amount of that, and we can carry funding over, and that's for move-in, out-of-district placement, things of that nature. Last year, to balance that budget, we spent a lot of that circuit breaker revolving account. So we're kind of back, once again, another big revolving account that's kind of low right now that we do anticipate spending, but that's going to be down a little bit, around $1 million at this point. But remember, every year with the new budget, we receive payments for circuit breaker every month. So that's going to be funding that's coming in as we're spending it. The ESSER, we have that on here now. The last ESSER funding was 2024. Since we kind of did 24, 25, and 26, the ESSER funds are, we'll probably, for the next budget, we'll probably just take that off because those funds have been fully spent. So when we look at the overall budget at this point with the city allocation and the overall budget, the overall budget goes up 3.11%, and the city allocations at this point at 726. Our next, and I'll go through some more of the slides in a second, but our next presentation for March 17th, because we have two more negotiations talking about compensation, I really believe in general we won't be able to release any of the final numbers, but in general I really believe we'll have a better understanding where our contracts are coming in, and I foresee that 7.26 for our next meeting to be reduced significantly for the city appropriation. And then I'll just go through everything that I just talked about is on this page here, the funding and the expenses. I'm not going to read you all of that information. But this is what I really think is important, is the demographic trends. So if you look over the last 5 years, our enrollment numbers have been pretty consistent, from 21-26 to 21-07, from 2021 to 25. So the enrollment numbers have been pretty constant, but what we talked about before is some of the demographics that have increased. So our English language learners, that has decreased. We had some families move out to a neighboring community. So those numbers have decreased from last year to this year. Our demographic trends for low income has increased slightly. And then demographics with students with disabilities, the last couple of years have kind of stayed constant. But I really want to show the demographics for high needs is when you incorporate all of those children that fit in those various categories. So we're at 30.8%, which is around 643 students or 640 students that. And if you look at students as individuals and have individual needs, this is where a lot of the funding over the past few years has gone to support these students, our most vulnerable students and families, and supporting them, through their education. So we don't anticipate, obviously we work on a lot of these cases, but these numbers I think are consistent, especially coming out of COVID the last few years. So these trends have gone up, I think, in other districts as well. The budget background here, information, the Chapter 70, and if you all recall a few years ago when we went to the full day tuition-free kindergarten, we utilized ESSER funds for that transition. And the formula plus our enrollment, you can see that 1 year we had the big jump up to $1 million. So $5 million and $5.6 million. And then last year we got a little bump. And then this year we've got a little bump for Chapter 70. So that's where, right now, that's where the governor's budget is for Chapter 70. I don't think that's etched in stone yet. And that's another area that I think from, Mayor Reardon to school systems, we're all looking at that Chapter 70 funding and seeing where that lands after the governor's budget gets approved. School choice. Every year we talk about school choice. So this has been one revenue source that for us has been consistent with our numbers that we already have in district. And a lot of districts have reached out to Newburyport, and might have a couple districts come in to school committee and kind of talk about the pros and the cons, because a lot of the districts are looking for additional funding, especially if you're looking at some of the cuts that have been happening not only around us but on the North Shore. A lot of programs for students in other districts are being cut. So I think there's a lot of families, looking to take advantage of, a system like Newburyport if there's seats that are available. So these are just some trends the last few years that you guys have all seen those numbers. And I think that's our last slide for tonight. Going back to this level service estimate, level service budget, I just want to highlight that's our estimate at this point, kind of our best guess of where we're landing. But I just want to reiterate the revolving accounts that we've had in the past that we utilized throughout. Last year, the last couple of years, we've spent those revolving accounts down. So as we're moving into next year, that's why you're going to see some of those account numbers that might be lower than what you've seen over the past, just because we're not carrying those balances that we typically carry into the following year. And as I said, March 17th, I believe we'll have a much more accurate and closer to a budget projection in a couple weeks.
All right, thank you.
Yes.
So, questions, Mayor?
I don't have a question, but, I say this a lot, but like we're having these conversations at the local mayor level all the time. And I look at this and I'm just like, I'm thinking of like next year or the year after that. Like eventually we're gonna run out of money. Like potentially the revolving funds will all be empty. So like,
Right.
you know, are you thinking about that, or are there things maybe we could do to preemptively get ahead of that, or are we just hoping? I don't know. Like I don't have an answer for sure.
No,
but,
that's a great question, and yes, I think there's a couple of things that are happening. Number one, obviously you don't want to every year try to balance a budget off of revolving accounts, right? But I think we know as superintendents, we know that every year, and that's part of that memo, every year special education costs are going up. Transportation costs are going up. So we've been advocating through our state officials, we need assistance here because eventually it's going to break the bank. You cannot afford these mandates that we're required to do. And so instead of waiting for this, because we've been talking about this for 5 years, is now on the North Shore, especially in our region, we're actually actively looking at cost sharing special education costs. The out-of-district placement costs, I mean, even if you didn't, the easiest thing for state officials that could help us with is take the out-of-district placement costs off of the school district and cities and towns back. That's an easy number for them to wrap their heads around, and it's simple, that they'll take those costs. But in the meantime, we're working on like the cost share. Like for example, that tuition, we have 2 students from another district that are accessing our special education program and paying tuition, but at a much reduced cost than they would have to pay at out-of-district placement. So that's just one piece that we're looking at. But we've been actively having our special education directors along with districts meeting on a regular basis to look at what programs does each district offer that's an exemplar program, and then instead of us sending students out, we can cost share in. The other piece we're looking at is also with transportation. So if we have students that are, for example, I'll use Landmark, let's say students are going to Landmark, and Amesbury sending students to Landmark, and Triton sending students to Landmark, can we cost share transportation? So, you know what I mean? So there's the things that I think the superintendents on the North Shore, we have a great collaboration, that we understand that we can't keep going down this road and just expecting costs to go into the roof. It's unsustainable, like the mayor said. But I think there's bigger ticket items that we can go after.
Yeah, Mr. Boger.
Can you broadly talk about on the mandated items, roughly, like what percentage is covered by the state and what percentage is covered federally? I mean, for obvious, the question is what's under threat.
So a few things. So like for example, a state mandate would be a 504 plan.
Sure.
Okay. 504 plans, if there's medical, nurses, things like that a student may need, would not be covered with like circuit breaker or under special education. So that would be a state and federal mandate that we would have to make accommodations for any students with disability or medical scenario. So that's one piece. Other aspects of there's just so many, but there are some students that are on IEPs that not necessarily so significant that they have to, out of district. We have a lot of in-district students that require services that we have to provide for them. So, for example, it could be OT, PT, it could be, a lot of different aspects of the special education programming that you're not going to receive funding for a lot of those things, but you have to make sure you're educating students. So,
okay.
I had a follow-up question on the revolving funds. I guess for the athletic revolving fund, what is the reason that we think I mean, are we seeing a reduction in what we're bringing in for fees?
No, we're gonna see, we've spent, if you look at the 423, that's what we've, have spent, in the revolving account towards sports.
Right.
So we shifted, a lot of those, funding sources over into the revolving account. So now as we're coming in, we typically, will take in around 300,000 or so, user fees. But before, if you recall, there was, we were carrying over
Right.
some of the revolving account balances. But so it's really, I think what we're gonna see, especially with athletics, is those user fees that come in are gonna be going out, and there's not gonna be much
It's not going to be as
savings.
much of a buffer. Yeah,
Correct.
which is honestly sort of what we've been working for.
Yeah, right.
And similarly on the transportation revolving fund, I think you described this. You said that you're expecting more people to sign up for bus service this year?
Yes.
Okay.
Mhm.
And you're seeing a trend there?
We are.
Good. That's good. Okay, there was something else and I can't remember what it was.
The-
I know what I was. Go
Yeah.
ahead, Mr. Gallagher. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say that, in the one area that we're looking at that's, is the circuit breaker. Typically, and, working with Mike Long and TMS, so to last year's budget, we spent a lot of the circuit breaker funding, so we're kind of at a point where it's like you don't want to be as low as we are right now. We still have some circuit breaker funding, but it's typically it's lower than you really want that to be,
Right.
because that's the first. If we have a student that moves in that requires additional special education services, typically the circuit breaker account is where you can fund that. Like, for example, a student came in, required out-of-district placement, and typically we could utilize circuit breaker funding to pay for that out-of-district placement, but we're at a point where, it's pretty low.
Yeah.
And so that's one account that between now and the end of the year, that we would like to see if we can build up that circuit breaker. And what we're doing is trying to shift some of the contracted services over to the general budget to save that circuit breaker funding.
Yep. Great.
I
I guess the other one comment, and then I'll turn it over to Ms. Hall.
I don't.
I think what's apparent to me is that we are influenced beyond just the decision not to fund certain programs. For example, the scenario you brought up, which I hadn't even comprehended, was the other tuition, where student exchange, we have a large population of folks who decide to come to our schools from abroad and are now just rethinking that because they don't want to be in the U.S.
Correct.
anymore.
It's a bigger conversation.
Yeah, bigger conversation, but I mean, I think these kind of ramifications, are filtering down to things beyond what was just direct federal influence. It's interesting. That was eye-opening to me. Yeah, Ms. Hall.
Yes.
Yeah, I just want to make sure I understand the numbers here on the circuit breaker reimbursement. The 2 million, is that anticipated spending as opposed to
Yes.
revenue? And
Yeah, that's
right.
not. That's anticipated what we plan on spending.
Okay, and then I don't remember from last year, when do we find out what our FY26
It will
reimbursement will be?
We'll end up with the governor's budget, because she is, if you recall, she's putting in 75% reimbursement for special education costs over the threshold. And then she's also put in her budget reimbursement, circuit breaker reimbursement for transportation. And I'm not sure if it's supposed to be at 90%, but I think last year it came in at 56%, but that's something.
So is that a number that we have before we approve our budget, or do we just have to kind
No,
of?
we typically get her budget, I think it's right before we pass ours.
I just
I think we
couldn't
get those
remember.
numbers,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I want to say it's usually in 8, I had the timeline.
Those things are starting to trickle out, like today I just got like the
Okay.
chapter 90 numbers, so yeah, we should have it before we take a vote.
Great,
So-
that's
so
good, 'cause
as we-
that's a
Right.
big number there, so. thank
As
you.
we move forward for our budget, and we're just gonna plan, because we haven't heard anything different, we're gonna plan on typically what we're used to after 7 years around of what we receive. If for some reason it does not, come in the way we expected, I don't think that's going to be a Newburyport problem. That's going to be a Commonwealth of
Right.
Massachusetts problem. But the one piece is like some of these entitlement grants that are so critical for us, the Title I. So if let's just say 120, let's just say that whole program was cut. Going back for us, the one piece that we have is we could utilize school choice to continue those programs. So that's one benefit that I think that Newburyport has that other districts may not have, because they don't have a go-to like that type of a revolving account. So I think that's why it's also, as we're moving into, this uncertain times, I think it's really important for some of those big, circuit breaker, school choice, is to really be cognizant of holding on to as much of that revenue going into next year, because it's going to be uncertain budgetary times for next year.
And it, like the mayor says, probably for years to come.
Years to come.
I think maybe, Mr. Ruger, I don't know if this was your question, but I think it would be helpful as we go forward to kind of flag the funding sources that could potentially be at risk if the federal government
Yes.
goes the direction it might, at worst case scenario. And, as I'm looking down this list, I think it's the ones that jump out to me are the IDEA, the title grants, but if there are others embedded
Other
in
grants,
those, that would be helpful to know, just so we have a sense of that potential delta. I think that's such a worst case scenario, and I'd rather not have to dip into school choice, but if that has to happen, I think it's good for us to have that sense. But then once that goes away, yeah, if anything happens during the year, we're in a tough situation. So, I think another question is maybe going forward. I think you guys do a good job of explaining funding sources and so forth. Chapter 70, is that fun? And I should know this answer, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Chapter 70 is based on the school population in the community, correct? So
Correct.
It doesn't matter where those people go to school. They could go to St. John's, they could go to Berwick Academy,
Yes.
Governors, whatever, but they are counted towards our reimbursement from the chapter.
That's
Is that
part
true?
of it, yeah.
Part of it, okay.
And then your school enrollment's also part of it. So
Okay.
for example, the kindergarten, because we were paid, parents were paying for our kindergarten, and once we went tuition free, then we could count those 140, 150 students part of our total enrollment.
Okay.
Mhm.
All right. Any other questions for the superintendent? All right. Thank you for this.
All right, yeah.
Good start.
It's the start.
It's the start.
So, thank you. Thanks, Mike, for your help.
He was giving you props from behind, I can tell.
He was? Is he shaking his head yes?
He was shaking his head
Okay.
no. All right, next item on our agenda is the high school competency determination policy, which has been through two of our subcommittees, teaching and learning subcommittee and the policy subcommittee. And the policy subcommittee recommended this be adopted as a new policy, which I think is in your packet. I'm trying to remember the
Yes.
number. IHA, I think it is.
IKF?
IKF.
IKF.
So
right?
it would be added to that as opposed to
Well,
being a new
I think actually what we discussed
policy?
at the policy committee was it would be IKFR, like it would be attached to IKF.
Yeah.
So it would be IKF would kind of stay the way it is, and then this would be an addendum to
Correct.
IKF. So it'd be IKFR, I think is how we typically do it. So yeah, I think in the packet you have the IKF policy as it is written, and then the proposed competencies, which we would just put
Added
in
on.
kind of as an addendum. Anything else? Do you want to say anything to this?
No, I
know
just
it
said,
also went through
yeah,
the-
it was great. The whole process starting from Mr. Wolf and his school council through Lisa Furlong, and then Ms. Higgins was also part of this. So it was, I think, a great collaborative effort to get to where we need to be, to to be in compliance, with the new state regulation, along with the recommendations from DESE. So I think we had a great meeting, a lot of collaboration, and I think this has been revised a few times to the point where we're comfortable in moving it forward.
All right. Any questions on this item? So it's page 40 in your packet, and it's the Newburyport Public Schools competency determination policy, which is said would be added on to the existing IKF.
So the second page is the existing IKF.
Correct.
Okay,
It's
and
it's a
first
little
page is-
backwards.
Right.
Okay, yeah, no,
Yeah, so the existing ICAF would not change. This would be an additional competency added on to the, so graduation requirements and competency are a little different. Do you want to describe, are you able to describe that?
So graduation, so this is the graduation requirements has already been approved, part of our policy because of the vote on MCAS and competency determination. State required all districts to present a plan on how we're going to show competency, especially for grades 9 and 10. So this is in addition to the graduation requirements. So it's not replacing this, it's just showing how we're measuring competency, grade 10.
Right. Does that make sense to people? Okay. And we are required to do this now, although I know Desi's coming out with some new guidance as we
Yes,
speak.
new
so-
guidance.
But we feel comfortable
Yes,
just moving forward what we have and.
correct.
Okay, if we need to
Yeah.
adjust, we can.
Mhm.
Okay. All right, any other questions on this one? This is our first read, so we don't have to vote. But if people have any questions or suggested revisions, we can address those between now and the next meeting. So if you do, reach out. All right, thank you.
All right, thank you.
And then next item on our agenda is subcommittee updates, which will be short because we have only one of our chairs here tonight, or two of our chairs, sorry. Ms. Hall, do you want to give any updates on the communications subcommittee?
Sure, just jump right down to that. Yeah, so we met last Thursday. That was productive. Sorry you couldn't make it, Mr. Boger, but can fill you in. So Mr. Callahan was there, and we also had Counselor Feroz Khan, which was great to get counselor input. We focused on planning for the joint FinCom meeting, and I think, I know that's going to be on March 20th. Mm-hmm. The timing is 5 p.m. That's tentative. That Brian was going to reach out and confirm that with Counselor Zeid.
That's actually better.
But yeah, we're hoping to do it for 5 o'clock, and so it would be a joint posted meeting and council of the whole, and of course school committee of the whole, if other people wanted to attend. And I believe that was helpful, Superintendent, getting some counselor input on
Yes.
kind of what they're going to be looking for, what questions and concerns they might be bringing forward, just so we can be as prepared as possible with slides and information. I believe Mr. Wood, he's left now, but he's going to be in attendance as
Yes.
well, right? Also, two state reps have been invited. I don't think attendance has been confirmed yet, but Don Shand, our rep, as well as Rep Manny Cruz out of Salem. He came to that meeting 2 years ago, and he was a really great source of information because he either is or was on the Salem School Committee. I don't know if he still is.
Yeah, he's the vice chair.
Pretty cool. He does
And the
both.
state rep,
He
yeah.
does both, so he has a lot of insight, especially in the, what we can maybe expect on reimbursements at the state level. So yeah, that was the focus of the meeting, was preparing for that joint meeting in March. We also made the decision, since that was set, that we don't need to meet in March. So I'll email you about that, Joanne, so we can officially cancel for March 27th. Because basically the March 20th meeting will effectively replace having a communications meeting.
Okay. Anything for superintendent evaluation?
No.
All right, so that wraps up our subcommittee updates, and we do have a, just FYI, we do have a FinCom meeting scheduled, I believe, for this coming Thursday,
Yes.
and then policy for, I believe, next
Monday.
Yeah, next Monday, the 10th.
Teaching and Learning also is meeting this Thursday
Okay,
at
great.
7:30.
Okay, super, thank you.
And the FinCom is 8 a.m.?
8 a.m.
8 a.m.,
on Thursday, the 6th.
Thank you.
Okay.
The quick question, the Teaching and Learning Committee, is that going to be in the morning now? So it's going to be 7:30 in the morning? Okay.
Oh, I missed that. I thought it was
Yeah, you missed
7:30 p.m.
Yeah, it-
Really?
It was, but.
Are you sure?
I'm positive.
Okay. I guess I didn't see the PM on there. All right.
Well,
No, it
That's-
was scheduled for the night, 7:30 at night, but there was some of our members,
I'm so glad you said that.
yes.
I have to be honest, I think that it would be worth revisiting that. These meetings are supposed to be open to public members, and 7:30 a.m. in the morning is not really an accessible time for members of the public. I'll just be honest. So maybe just reconsider that as a group.
Yeah, I'm just hearing. This is breaking news for me, so.
Yes.
And I think I'm the only member of the committee here right now, so.
Yeah, okay.
Michelle?
I think the FinCom meeting is the 13th, next Thursday.
Thank you. You're right.
Yeah, okay.
That would make sense. It's usually the Thursday prior to the second meeting
What
of the
happens
month.
when you don't have your chairs here?
Yeah.
Sorry, yes, I think you're right. Yeah, it's next, the 13th. The policy committee is the 10th. But yeah, I think that 7:30 a.m. start needs to be revisited. Okay.
Do you have the same feelings about the Finance Committee?
No, 8 a.m. seems realistic to me.
Oh,
It's
Yeah,
just
no,
like
no, I just-
pre-8 a.m., pre-8
I guess-
o'clock seems a little.
makes sense, yeah.
Yeah. It's like. Okay, superintendent's report.
Yeah, just a couple updates here. We met with finalists and did the contract, and Mr. Wolf will be sending out, I think, an announcement to everyone, who that person's going to be. And then we're pulling together, I don't have the school choice projections right now. I have some idea, but I kind of want to wait till March 17th when everyone's here to kind of look at the school choice open slots. So that's kind of where we're at.
All right. That was brief.
That was very brief, yes. That's why you didn't have a big, I didn't want to put 2 bullets on the page.
It's all good. All right, any new business? All right. 7:42, someone want to make a motion to adjourn?
So moved?
Can I
Second.
make just a comment before we
Rewind.
go? Yeah, no, I think, I really appreciate the presentations tonight, Mr. McSweeney and the superintendent as well. I do think it would be helpful and behooves us to discuss prioritization as much as humanly possible, just because sadly, I mean, just given the last week, it's hard to imagine there won't be shifting targets, and I think that there'll be budget shifting. So while, you know, everybody wants the concrete and the masonry fixed, in the greater scheme of things, those things might fall to the wayside if, in fact, we're left with the responsibility to cover other very, very important school functions. So, just a thought.
Okay. And we will probably continue some of these budget conversations, we will continue some of these budget conversations at the FinCom meeting as well, which is next Thursday, the 13th. Okay, anything else? All right, we had a motion to adjourn. Second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right. Thank you.